All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to next Propel webinar, using PR to stand out in a sea of digital noise. Give everyone a few more minutes to hop in here. If you want to share in the chat where you're calling in from, that's one of my favorite parts as we get started. We have today our special guest, Andrew's in London, and I'm in Florida. So that's just a glimpse of the reach we get here. If you want to share.
Spanning the Atlantic.
Right? Our global webinars. We still have some people calling in. Oh, Chicago. Very cool. Columbus. Had some family there. And hopefully not too many people in Florida are worried about this hurricane. I know that's throwing a little loop for us Florida people. That's Southern Maine. Wow. New York City. Welcome. Thanks everyone for being here. While we give everyone another minute to join, we can go ahead and start a poll just to have a little entertainment here. So the question is, where do you have the best luck reaching your audience or audiences? So we got a bunch of options here, but I know that's not everything. So if you have a secret place, enter that in the chat. But we've got social media, paid channels, media placements, earned media, company blog, live events like webinars, training sessions. So go ahead and enter your strongest channel there so we can take a look at how people are doing. Oh, Ghana. I see Lynn coming from West Africa. That's awesome. Give you all another minute to fill out this poll while we're waiting. Oh, school PR. We hear from Kelly. It's very successful. Families and stuff. Cool. Tampa, Florida represent. Welcome, Nancy. All right, let's see what we got for some of these poll results. All right. So very great to see that we're getting the most success, at least from this group, in the news and media placements. It's definitely what we want to talk about today. Some great success on social and live events as our runners up. Cool. So hopefully that gives you a perspective of where we're all at with some of our successful channels, and we can talk more about what's not working so much, why, all of that. So again, we'll just introduce the webinar. For those who are just calling in, we're going to talk about using PR to stand out in a sea of digital noise. And moving into our introductions. Get to the next slide. Cool. I am Sam. I'm the marketing manager at Propel. And I've been part of the Propel team for about 1.5 years now. And before that, I've had a handful of different communications roles across industries, including cybersecurity with my background in PR. Joining me is Andrew Smith from London. He's the director of Escherman and a PR consultant of many years. Escherman is a digital communications consultancy for marketing directors, managers, in-house PR departments, PR agencies who all need help developing and executing highly effective digital marketing programs. He is a chair member of the CIPR and trains communications pros in social media, analytics, SEO, digital marketing, and other topics at CIPR, among other organizations. So thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Excited for the conversation today. So moving into the agenda, we're going to cover some background of Propel following these introductions. We're going to talk about the power of earned media today, how to adapt to search engine and algorithm updates, implications of earned media gaining traction today more than it used to, and resources that can help you break through the noise. And at the end, we'll have some Q&A time left over. And we'd love to see some hashtag Propel Live tweets with any aha moments, takeaways that you have throughout the session. So feel free to take a screen grab or whatever it is you'd like to do and post that on Twitter. Moving into background about Propel. So, a little bit more about Propel if you're new. Zach Cutler founded the company as a former PR pro. So, it's the first PR tool built by PR people for PR people, which is kind of different from some of our competitors. So, he founded it in 2019 after running his own agency for about 9 years. In his agency years, Zach was always on the lookout for better technology to manage his own agency's campaigns, journalist relationships, team productivity, and business outcomes. So, finding none that suited his needs quite exactly, he decided to build the first CRM specifically for PR on the market and sold his agency to fully dedicate his time to building Propel. Now we are on a mission to democratize and make PR tech accessible to the masses, excuse me. And we support leading brands and agencies like Real Chemistry, Microsoft, and PR by reimagining earned media. Long-winded, that's all you'll get for now. Thanks for learning more. We'll dive into the session now. So getting into the power of earned. So as we know, there's no bias, or there shouldn't be bias in earned. So by a long shot, I think we can objectively agree that earned can be the most powerful compared to paid or even owned channels. So let's talk a little bit more about that, how that's evolved, and what we're seeing today. So I don't know if anyone saw the recent BuzzSumo report come out, but one stat that stuck out to me was that their own PR pitching research found that journalist content lands 315 engagements on average, while non-journalist content achieves 114. So that's just one example of what we all see as the news has so much more credibility than anything else. But I'm curious to hear from you, Andrew. Do you think earned is continuing to get more powerful or a bit less powerful than before, and why? Loaded question to start off.
What a great opening question there.
Yeah.
I think in all seriousness, again, you can tell from the gray hair in my beard that I've worked in PR for 35 years. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the potential and power of earned media has never been more important for a whole variety of reasons. You mentioned that BuzzSumo report, which is incredible. I mean, BuzzSumo looked at 675 million pieces of content. And out of all of that, it's fairly obvious that when a journalist writes content, then on average, it gets 3 times the level of social media engagement. So I've known this for years, running workshops and using various tools to show to people, when you're looking at content creation, don't just assume it's always about creating your own. You know, maybe the better route is if you can persuade the journalist to effectively write the story. That is the piece of content that's far more likely to gain visibility, to gain engagement, and to actually influence real people and real audiences. But it's not just social. If you look at search engine optimization, there's a US-based tool company called Visibly did, I thought, a fantastic piece of research last year. Very simply, they analyzed Google search results and looked at so-called generic search terms. And what they found was that the most likely type of content to rank most highly in search results for non-brand generic terms was editorial coverage. Who knew? That opens a whole other sort of kind of area of interest when you consider that. You know, I think quite often when PR professionals they get a media hit, it's like fantastic. You know, break open the champagne. We got that story in the New York Times, amazing. But then it's kind of a week goes by. It's like, well, that was last week. Now we need to move on to getting a new piece of coverage. Versus, sure, it reached people at the time, but if that piece of coverage continues to surface highly in Google search results, it persists over days, weeks, months, possibly years. And that's still driving people to that coverage, still influence them, still providing value. I think that's an example where I think the PR industry everywhere is not actually taking into account the true extent of the reach and the value of that earned media coverage. And again, in a world where, I mean, you look at the numbers, it's kind of mind-bending to think that I think next year it's predicted that around $400 billion worldwide will be spent on online display advertising. And yet everyone seems to know that, yeah, most of that money isn't really putting something in front of a real human being. Ad blocking is the greatest process movement in history. Over 2.3 billion people worldwide routinely block online ads. If you consider it, editorial is by far and away the most likely way you are actually going to get in front of a real person with eyeballs and a brain and capable of being influenced is through earned media coverage.
Great.
Is that sufficient to kind of demonstrate that, let's face it, earned media coverage
It was a great,
pretty important?
Great way to kick it off. That's such a good point about the different people that you're even reaching in the first place. Like, I think we've all been there with paid ads, and you get all these impressions or you get these different results, but who's actually seeing it? Right.
It seems an obvious question to ask. It's everyone is presumably trying to reach a particular group of people, whoever that might be. And if I don't reach them, well, how can I possibly influence them? And what are they more likely to pay attention to? I read a great statistic somewhere that said that you're more likely to die in a plane crash than to click a banner ad. When somebody sees real editorial, they're far more likely to actually pay attention to it and potentially be influenced by it. So
you have a much more concrete audience there. I think in a lot of other channels, it takes a really long time to almost curate who you're going to have those eyes from.
Yeah.
And that's almost skipped in these more editorial channels.
For balance, I should say that I'm not completely saying that paid media of any kind is completely hopeless. I think paid social is very different. I think there's definitely a role for that. And again, paid banner ads, okay, on the whole, I don't think they work. But I think if you're careful about where those banner ads are served, then possibly. I mean, it was a great experiment. I think it was JP Morgan were originally advertising on 250,000 websites, and then they reduced it down to, I think it was approximately 5,000, and it had no effect at all.
Interesting. That is
in
a
fact,
good example.
I think they found that the results from advertising actually improved when they were considered about ensuring. And again, actually goes back to the relationship to earned media. Where were the most successful display ads going? They were appearing on trusted media sites.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. We have a question in the chat here that actually goes pretty closely with my follow-up question. It's, how are we defining earned media? So they say 80% of journalist content that they encounter is packed with affiliate links, even if it does appear to be purely editorial at first glance, which I also am curious what you have to say about that in general. So especially, we have a lot of PR agency folks here today. I'm curious what you think about where we draw the line with earned. So like Tuesday Hart commented here, a lot of times we see editorial pieces that are pretty close to an advertisement or have so many backlinks to the product page. I'm sure that happens at different outlets. So as we're seeing more companies use earned than we have in the past, how do we make sure that we're not getting to an unethical point where news articles become advertisements?
Yeah, and that's a great point. But in a way, nothing's changed. I mean, I remember 30 odd years ago, back in the days when print ruled supreme. Yes, you had advertorials, but it was clearly outlined as advertorial because the reader knew that somebody had paid for this. We can get this whole conversation about the quality of the earned media site, but I hear what people are saying about Well, ostensibly, it's a piece of journalism, but yes, there's an affiliate link. So if I click that, then the vendor or somebody is benefiting this. So why is that there? What's the financial relationship there between the person writing the story and the content and placing those links? We could be here all night talking about the world of journalism and what's happened to it. I mean, quick history point, of course, is that if you go back to the early 2000s, I mean, media companies everywhere thought this is brilliant. Print still reigned supreme. The web was here, and look at this thing called Google. It sends us all this amazing free traffic. Yes. Let's get all of our content indexed by Google, and we'll get all this traffic and we'll monetize it, and we're all going to be rich. Of course, didn't happen. In fact, it's gone the other way, and let's be honest, Google, Facebook, et al. Kind of rule the roost. So I confess we have a real challenge where real journalism costs money. Real journalists need to be kind of paid properly in order to do that job properly, and yet the whole dynamics of media sites everywhere, they need to raise revenue through advertising. It pushes them to generate impressions. That pushes the journalism down the route of page view journalism. Write the stuff that's basically going to get more impressions, irrespective of the relevance, editorial quality, etc. I don't think we're going to solve that one overnight, but I think as PR and communications professionals, that's supposed to be our expertise. We're supposed to, on behalf of whether we're agency side, representing clients, or working in-house, representing the organization, it's our role to identify the audiences we're trying to reach, and then by definition attempt to understand what are the right media sites to target in order to reach those audiences. And again, there are various ways that and various tools people can use to get better, I think, at understanding that. If I'm allowed to talk about other products, I mean, I mean, SimilarWeb, which I'm sure many people on this session will be familiar with. I mean, SimilarWeb is a pretty amazing tool. It's a massive panel. It's becoming the kind of go-to source for data, or estimated data about how many people visit certain sites. But it also potentially provides you the ability to say, well, if there is my competitor, not only does it tell me how many people visit my competitor's site, but it tells me what are the media sites that people who visit my competitor actually visit themselves. It almost delivers your target media list. So now you're basing it on that. That's the people I want to reach. Those are the media sites they clearly go to and pay attention to. Now let's go and use Propel to find out the right journalists to target, to reach the people through those media outlets. That's a very simplistic workflow, but you get the idea. So as I say, that's a roundabout way of saying that it's always beholden to the PR professional to give the guidance and to have that best practice advice to recommend the media outlets and journalists to target.
Right. Very good reminder that we can't be using spray and pray anymore. For those who ever used to do that, hopefully not a lot of us.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, I mean, you can.
You can, but
there's nothing to physics respect to do it. I certainly wouldn't suggest that you do, but it's a
you can.
free world in a way. Yeah, but I wouldn't.
And just to reiterate what that even means, if anyone's relatively new to PR, that's just sending out your pitch to maybe hundreds of journalists, same one, and hoping for the best. And it's a good way to make a lot of people delete your emails. It's a good way to alienate journalists. So just what Andrew's saying, just really finding the right outlet fit, the right audience fit. It's just a very good basics reminder.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just to add to that, I mean, and I noted this over 15 years ago, that actually even kind of ISPs start to recognize that, hang on, this person sending email to this journalist. Well, the journalist never opens it, the journalist deletes it. Well, we just won't even bother putting it in the journalist's email inbox because it's fairly obvious that they're not interested. So
Mhm.
it's I guess it was an early form of kind of email shadow banning, if that's the right term to use. You're happily
Mhm.
sending out your emails, oblivious to the fact they're not even entering the inbox. It's not even a case of they're in the inbox and they get ignored. Journalist never even sees them because the ISP is already taking that decision for them, and yeah, it's a dangerous route to go when your email, your domain, your as I say, starts to become, you know, quasi blacklisted in that way. Not very
Right.
helpful.
And become spam essentially.
There we
Um,
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is a good segue into our next topic. We'll get to the next slide. So, how do we adapt to this noise, even through a journalist email inbox, search engine algorithm updates? So, we're seeing every platform try to get people what they want and put eyes where they should be through just everyone having a voice online. So, how do we navigate that as PR people? Andrew published this LinkedIn newsletter back in May, and I think it's only become more relevant over time and over months. So, do you want to walk us through this piece a bit? Maybe give any updates on if
I,
you
I
think
should
this is still
I
the
should
case?
well, I should say for clarity, that was May 2014 that I wrote this. So
Yes,
that's
that's a big
eight
detail.
8 years ago. 8 years ago. Even before that, back in 2010, I did some analysis of um, click-through rates on from tweets. So those are long memory. We're even around at that point. If you look at Twitter in 2010, all the major media sites were clearly on Twitter: New York Times, Guardian, etc., happily sharing links to editorial content. At that
Hmm.
time, I think I'm right in saying New York Times even then had roughly around 1.5 million followers. Um, Back in those days, all media sites would use bit.ly as their URL shortener. I think, okay, whatever. But back then, little trick, you could take any bit.ly link, put a plus symbol at the end of it, and then click. And that would take you to the data page for that link. So basically anybody could see how many clicks does the New York Times get on an individual tweet. Brilliant. So I thought, wow, this is going to tell me you've got 1.5 million followers. Let's see how many hundreds of thousands, potentially, million people click those links. Oh, 20? That can't be right. Can't be right. Long story short, the click-through rates on Twitter, even in 2010, to content from media sites was tiny.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not sure there's a connection, but interestingly, certainly in the UK, The Guardian and all the other major media sites, about a month after I wrote that post, all stopped using bit.ly. I don't know why, because they didn't want you to know sort of the relatively low kind of click-through rates. But it made me even think then, there's something wrong here. If you really have got 1.5 million followers, then you'd surely expect. Now, I'm not saying that occasionally there was the odd story that did get 15, 20, 30,000 clicks, but that was the top upper limit. Nothing got 500,000 or anything remotely resembling the follower bases of the media outlets. So 2014, we'd then seen the arrival of tools that allowed you to check, certainly on Twitter, whether or not a follower base was comprised of real human beings or whether a percentage were fakes.
Hmm.
And, again, the thrust of the piece I wrote in 2014 was to suggest that actually there was an awful lot of fakery going on in the world of certainly social. And again, it was interesting because even then you were seeing people saying, oh, the future's kind of social, the future's Facebook and paid and da da da. I was thinking, yeah, but editorial content is still the one thing that people are going to treat more credibly. If you can get that coverage, there are various ways in which you can get more people to get their eyes on it. But again, we've already kind of alluded to it. Editorial coverage, online editorial coverage, links can provide value in multiple different ways. The fact that it's published means that a number of people will see it. The fact that it's then discoverable through search, more people will see it. I'm kind of saying that yes, click-through rates on social even now are still relatively low, But nevertheless, if you do get a story in a major media site, their own social followings are large, and they're far more likely to drive traffic to the coverage, and they're far more likely to gain, as we saw from the BuzzSumo research, high levels of engagement, which creates this kind of virtuous circle where more engagement will lead to more people seeing the post, more people likely to click through to read the full piece of editorial content. So, I mean, the fakery and the bots haven't gone away, but again and again and again, what the common thread through all this all along has been editorial. Out of all the different sort of content options, if you can get that coverage, and of course that's the big question, if you can get
Right.
it,
Right. And
then
just
its value is pretty immense.
and that just being the most honest channel, really. You'll have different impressions and audiences everywhere, but especially with lots of automation and different boosting platforms and all kinds of things that have only gone up in numbers today, it is kind of difficult to see where that genuine audience is besides just a news audience. So from there, that kind of begs a question about SEO and PR. If you want your news to even be ranking for different phrases and terms, do you have any tips for that for PR people that are getting genuine news placements, but maybe they urge the journalist to write about it in a certain way, or use certain wording over other types to help the brand's goals?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this probably about best part of 15, 20 years. I know that if you go back sort of to the early sort of 2010s, then there's a lot of talk about, is SEO going to overtake PR and eat PR's lunch? You saw the rise of SEOs saying, oh yes, write press releases, publish them online, and then kind of they're great for links and great for visibility. No, that was never true. But at the same time, it kind of ignored the fact that actually, again, editorial content can play a massive role in search engine optimization, either because the editorial content itself has got a far better chance of ranking highly in Google for particular keyword phrases than your own original content, as well as if you can also persuade the journalist to include a link to your own content, then no question. If the BBC links to your site, that's worth 10,000 backlinks from a whole bunch of blogs that were created yesterday by some automated blog farm. I exaggerate for effect, but you get the idea. But again, I've long argued this, that when you're looking at media pitching, yes, fundamentally you have to create a pitch that ultimately is going to convince the journalist that yes, out of all the things I could write about and all the other hundreds of people who want us to write about them and not you, I'm going to write about you and your organization and your topic, your theme. You've convinced me. I'm going to write it. Hooray. Now, as part of that pitch, I mean, I wouldn't do it sort of kind of bluntly, but if you can subtly, as part of that, introduce words, phrases, concepts that the journalist may use. If you've done your research, then you'll know already that, yes, SEMrush or whoever tells me that tens of thousands of people are already looking for this. And there's the current set of results. Now, the likelihood that if this journalist does write about us and uses those words and phrases, when that gets published, that's got a far greater chance of going right up to the top of Google really quickly, gaining visibility, gaining clicks, etc. I'm going to use that. It's a few years old now, but it's always been a favorite example, and it's from the UK. I think it was a brilliant case study where the client was I guess a bathroom supplies company. They sold baths and sinks. It's like, how are they going to get national coverage or whatever? And the research, the keyword research showed that certainly in the UK, a huge number of people would search for the phrase bathroom suite, but spelt SWEET, not SUITE.
That's
And
interesting.
then the amazing idea was, right, how do we capitalize? Let's persuade the client to build a chocolate bath, and we will promote the chocolate bath. And long story short, as a media story, it was wall to wall. every national newspaper ran and the picture of the chocolate bath. And it tapped into the fact that the research has shown that we're all searching for bathroom suite, not bathroom suite, SUITE. Patently, all that coverage generated links back to the vendor's own site. More and more people started searching for bathroom suite, and of course, their bathroom suites ranked highly for that, as well as improving visibility for the term bathroom suite, the normal version. Amazing, and that all stemmed from looking at the keyword research, connecting it to the client, and connecting it to a story that the media would then pick up, and they did. I think even the agency couldn't believe the level of pickup that got. It was astonishing. It was, I think I've had 150 or 60 pieces of media coverage, and not in the UK either. It suddenly sort of the whole world decided this is great.
Yeah, that's a really good example of such a strategic response to a strange reality they were facing. They could have looked at that and said, this is a disaster, they're never going to find us, and we don't get coverage anyways. But figuring out how they can kind of make light of that and just blow up, that's
it's
a
that
really
creative
good
connect. Yeah, the creative connection. Well, it's a mix of, I think, a great example of a mix of using data to provide you with insight, but the real I think piece of resistance is then creatively taking that and then creatively turning it into the story and the pitch and the delivery of that, i.e., let's create a chocolate bath.
And that measurement and creativity do go together. I think initial reaction is numbers crush creativity, but it's absolutely not true.
That's the trifecta we're seeking. It's the creativity, data, insight. I think very often in PR, I don't know, it's the kind of sweeping generalizations, but I think very often PR people is, well, I don't do numbers. I'm really creative, and of course that's massively important. You have to have creativity, but creativity in isolation, I think in the modern world, just that's not enough. You need to combine that creativity with data, with insight, with execution, and you get all those elements right, and that's the route to success, in my humble opinion.
Totally. All right, let's keep going so we can have them look at something else. So let's talk a little bit about the implications of earned gaining traction. So we're getting into a time where we continue to see all of these different just complete washes of noise across channels, and it's hard to break through. It's hard to figure out SEO. It's always changing. So we see a lot of businesses across industries turn to earned. And as PR people, what does that mean for us? So we'll start off with another poll. We'll launch that in a second here, and we'll have these options up. And the question is, on average, how many pitches do you send each day? So we'll get that launched in a second here. And here are some of your options. Maybe you're just here for the party, none, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and so forth. We hope not to see any of these 60 a day journalists swimming in pitches answers, but we'll see. Maybe you pitch all on a few days a week. Just an average of how that would play out in the course of the week is fine too. So I'll give you another minute to answer that so we can get an idea of how much we're pitching, what it takes to get a placement now that earned is just becoming more and more popular. All right, we could go ahead and post those results. Let's see what we got. All right, so we've got most on the 1 to 5. A few people here for the party. Glad to have you. So that's good to see. Healthy amount, it sounds. We stayed out of that 60 plus. Very nice. All right, so let's get into some of the numbers we see through our side of things. So because we have our email integrations, we're able to anonymously take a look at these numbers and volume, all sorts of metrics if you're new to our data. So we saw that over the course of the year so far, the daily average is 14. So of course that can vary. Maybe there's some bigger pushes at certain times of the year or whatnot over others that make that balance out. but we see this as a pretty high number. So Andrew, you've written a little bit about what's worth it as a PR pro, what it takes to get a placement, how some are, of course, much more valuable returns than others. Do you have any tips on how to produce high volume of quality earned coverage, especially when even through pitching, we're seeing more and more pitches each day from PR professionals? That's not even counting any other company that's just sending their one-off emails.
Yeah. Well, obviously using Propel is the first protocol there. It's
Love that answer.
there we go. No, but in all seriousness, Propel, you have an incredible kind of data set there. If I'm not mistaken, literally looking at million plus email pitches per annum. And I guess related to the figures around the number of pitches, it's the response rate. I think I'm right in saying that it's been roughly around 3%, hasn't it, for a little while now? It goes up and down a bit, but on the whole, for every 100 PR pitches, 3 even get a response back from the journalists. So that's not even getting coverage, that's just getting a response. So the amount that then result in coverage will be smaller than that. So I've always been a big advocate of less is more. I think increasingly just that, I mean, you mentioned it already, spray and pray, or kind of carpet bombing journalist email boxes with emails. Just it's pointless. In the UK, I think it was last year. I think it's Harry Cole, who's a hugely, in the UK certainly, hugely well known political journalist, writes for one of the big national newspapers, and he shared this screenshot of his inbox. He said, "This is a normal day," and it was just nothing but PR pitches and press releases, and you could just read the subject lines and go, whoever sent that, did they seriously think that Harry Cole would pay any attention to that? Why have you been sending it to him? It's got nothing to do with his beat, his area of focus. So you could just see at a glance that you could rule out 75% of them. What was the point? Even the ones that you're just looking at the headlines, the subject lines of those emails in his inbox, and you could. I mean, I think a small child could look at it and say, "Yeah, he's never going to write about that."
Right.
So why do it? I mean, it's curious, isn't it? What is the? Are we being pressured by clients to do something? We need to be seen to be doing something. If we're not pitching, it's a bit like lottery. If you don't buy a lottery ticket, well, you can't possibly win it. But at the same time, just buying a ticket does not guarantee you a jackpot. I think you need a much more kind of a smarter and more strategic way of approaching it. Hence why a tool like Propel, with its ability for you to kind of better understand not only how to identify the right journalist, but to understand things like when would be the best time to send this. Because again, I think we often tend to fall into this trap of, well, we'll send them all out at the same time. I'll assume that journalists get in the office at a certain time, so we're going to send it at 9 a.m. And I think previous Propel researchers said, no, they don't open them at 9 o'clock. They open at 11 o'clock.
Right.
There's all manner of ways in which certainly Propel data combined with other data, I think can help everyone to make more informed decisions about the right journalist to pitch to, what that pitch could actually consist of, and the basic mechanic of when should I send it? When's the best time to send it to maximize the chances that, because basically it's like any form of email marketing, quite frankly. You've got about 2 seconds. If it even makes its way into the journalist's inbox and it's on the preview panel, you've probably got about 2 seconds. What's the first thing the journalist is going to do? Like we all do. Who's it from? Who's that email from? Do I recognize the sender? If I don't, what are the odds? Delete, file, ignore, whatever. I recognize them. Okay, you've got another 2 seconds. I'm looking at that headline. Is it worth the effort of that click to open it and read the pitch? Yeah,
Right. And from there,
yeah,
and from there, that's where it really gets interesting, because you're right, that is your first impression. You have a few seconds to make an impact, but journalists also want to be treated like people. So then we're navigating
Yeah.
sounding like an email marketer or sounding like someone they want to
Well,
work with. And
it's a mix. Yeah, it's a mix of. I mean, I think there are lessons to be learned. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? When even today in 2022, lots of different surveys of journalists ask journalists, what is your preferred method of contact? And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it's always overwhelmingly email, isn't it?
mm-hmm.
It's always email. That's the journalist's preferred way of being contacted and pitched to. So that's what we do. We pitch them through email. And then they complain about the volume of pitches. Not being serious there. But yeah, there's again this element of the data, using that to give your email pitch the best chance. But again, at the end of the day, it's still, I would argue, in 2022, it's about relationships. Yeah, how do you when that email drops in, and goes, oh yeah, well I know who that's from because I met them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more difficult to meet people in person than it once was, but or just that relationship building aspect of it, I think, is still so massively important in the world of public relations. Again, the thing about earned media, it's interesting when SEOs talk about link building. I don't know if it's the same in the US, but certainly in the UK, with unfailing regularity on Twitter, you will see a journalist tweeting that oh, I've had some PR person demanding that I include a backlink in this story. I'm not here to put those things in automatically. And then all the PRs look like, go, is that really? Was that really a PR person? And then of course it turns out it wasn't really a PR. So it was an SEO who is used to doing normal link building, and there's a sense of entitlement. Well, we're entitled to a link. What do you mean you're not going to give us a link? It's like, and all the PRs just virtually going, please stop, stop now, stop digging. And you can see this kind of interesting. There are some great SEOs out there who wouldn't dream of doing that kind of thing, but that behavior, it's not just us, it's that the other sectors that also have behaviors and approaches that aren't exactly optimal. But again, going back to this idea of the relationship and the effect that then has on recognition. At the end of the day, I remember my first bosses in PR is interesting, and she said that fundamentally, is your ultimate loyalty to the client or to the journalist? And her view is certainly it's always the journalist. Like, really? Yeah, don't our clients pay the bills? Yes, but she perhaps cynically said, but the clients do come and go. Whereas if you intend to remain in PR, if you annoy a journalist, you've got long memories. You don't want that. If you're going to have a career in this, and it's part of your work, even if you're not doing it yourself, but you rise up through the ranks and you're responsible for others doing it, then the importance of building and maintaining those relationships with journalists, as I say, you want to hang with the clients as long as possible. But let's be honest, what agency on the planet has still got the same clients they had 40 years ago? Well, they don't. So right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Just sometimes it's a good reminder that people in PR are in PR for a reason. And sometimes you have to have those difficult conversations with clients when they expect 10 tier 1 placements in a month or whatever it is they have their sights on. And
yeah, I mean, again, I would always argue that you're, as a consultant, you're being paid for your counsel and your advice. I know. It's the client's prerogative to ignore your advice, but on paper certainly that's presumably why they're hiring you, because that's your field of expertise. I wouldn't expect to go in and tell a financial director how to do accounting, but it's kind of curious how everybody else is an expert in PR. Front page of the New York Times and be quick about it. How difficult can that be? It's like, well,
right. Yeah, come on. Are you guys even working over there? Yeah, let's get in the New York Times.
That's right.
That's awesome. So I'll wrap it up just to make sure we're conscious of everyone's time. We're going to end 5 minutes early today for some schedule changes. But last but not least, Andrew's been talking a bit about what you can use throughout this presentation, whether it be similar web, different platforms, different resources. And I want to reiterate one more time that at the end of the day, it's about the quality. It's about you being a PR professional or a communications professional and knowing how to send that high quality pitch, how to tailor to an audience. We all know best practices, but there are tools to help you along the way and enhance what you're doing. So I just wanted to touch on a few of those before we let you go today. Andrew mentioned our pitch booster earlier. That's one of our newer features. And we basically created that to go into the results that are happening across our platform about when journalists are actually opening these pitches. And this includes time of day and day. And so that's basically just an option in our platform to, before you send a pitch, have it instead schedule for that optimal time for each journalist you're talking to. So we're really excited about that. And if you want to read more, here's a little clip of our blog about that. But again, we really just want to give you what you need to make your job easier, help you help journalists. And that's one of our really exciting updates. If you're a customer already and you want to kind of learn more about this, haven't really seen how to use it, we're happy to walk you through that as well. So yeah, that's a fun update from our end. And then I'll let Andrew touch on a little bit about how to reach him if you want to learn more about all of his different research, and LinkedIn newsletters are awesome. So he can touch on that a bit.
Thanks. I can be found on various places online, but if I had to pick one, my LinkedIn profile, the link is there. If you find the post I'm putting up of relevance and interest, then you can ring the bell, and you'll be automatically notified of any new posts that I'm putting out. I'm taking advantage of the LinkedIn newsletter format, which rolled out to individuals on LinkedIn last March. If you choose to sign up for that, then I try and sort of publish that roughly kind of once a month, bit of a roundup of all the various kind of observation trends, reports that I've seen, quite often citing data from Propel and other places, and trying to kind of build that sort of complete picture of what's going on, what are the things that really are having more of an effect, actually working, things that myth busting, assumptions that people often make, either based on a very, very tiny sample, it worked once, but can I repeat it? Or it sounded plausible, and then suddenly it's kind of accepted wisdom. So I'm very much in favor of evidence-based, data-driven approaches. But yes, follow me on LinkedIn. Well, you don't have to follow me, but if you'd like to, you can find me on LinkedIn at that URL. Ring the bell. You can get alerted to my posts without having to follow me if you ring the bell. So that's your choice. So there we are.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And before we get going, we had a few questions trickle in. So a bit of a challenging first one is from Tom. So some recent studies are reporting that the trust of journalists or media is dwindling. So how should we now evaluate our best earned media options in this environment where trust is still not quite guaranteed, maybe dwindling?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question, Tom. I'm sure most of us are familiar with Edelman's Trust Barometer. It's been going for 2 decades. Very, very briefly, you look back at the last sort of 4 or 5 years, and sure, no question, the Trust Barometer. Interestingly, when you look at sources of information that people trust, then ironically, Google search results come out top. So the interesting implication of that is that if a piece of media coverage appears in a Google search result, do I trust it more because Google says it's the right answer versus if I was exposed to it in the first place? But to the point about trust in journalism, journalists, in the media generally, I think that's right. I mean, in the UK, there's an organisation. Well, it's a joint project between I think Oxford University and Reuters. They do every year a huge, massive study of journalism, people's attitudes towards it, trust, etc. I think the honest answer is that it varies around the world from country to country. I better get this right. I think, for example, I think in Germany, trust has gone up in the media. In UK, certainly it's been sort of trending down slightly. And again, there's lots of nuance. Certain media outlets are seeing trust levels rise. You know, the good old BBC, still pretty much, I know it's got its detractors, etc. But on the whole, the general public and wider audiences in that particular instance still would, if the BBC says it, are likely to trust it. I'm not trying to avoid the question. I think it's a perfectly valid question to ask. But in terms of navigating it, again, that's down to PR professionals to use the expertise, judgment, and data to make those informed choices. I think, ironically, a quasi SEO technique would be to say, well, look at the domain authority of the outlet. If we're using that as a proxy for Google's perception of these things, then is that a way of saying, well, if a TrustFlow scored or page authority score for journalist content is 89, then versus one that's 52, I'm not saying that's the be all and end all, but there are ways I think we can start to try and make those kind of database informed judgments about which journalists and media outlets are more likely to be trusted by the audiences that we're ultimately trying to influence. That's always a key point that we need to bear in mind. We've always got a particular audience or audiences in mind for our work. What does it mean to them? What does it mean to them? That's the key thing.
Right. That's interesting to be considering exactly who your own audience is too, and pairing that with these evaluations, because maybe an outlet has a great standing and that's always a good sign, but are your specific audience groups going to be there? Are you going to reach them in the way you want?
Yeah, I mean, it's an old line from a very old song which says, you're the cream in my coffee, but if I take my coffee black, that takes on a whole different meaning, doesn't it? So.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for that. That was really helpful. I know it's a bit of a loaded question, and there are a lot of places to look for an evaluation of trust. You have the Edelman Trust Barometer is awesome for that. Domain authority is a good indicator. There's all sorts of metrics we can look at. Thank you. Some of these other questions are a bit more tailored to Propel research. So I see Catherine is curious about our measurement. Is this 14 pitches and follow-ups a day, or is it single pitches a day? So good question. So that's a bit difficult for us to differentiate, because people could create a new pitching initiative and Propel to follow up. So it's not perfect, but this is 14 pitches that they have sent out. Those could be follow-ups, as those aren't indicated separately. But that is a goal for our future research. So stay tuned for follow-up practices specifically. We'll be releasing a guide about best practices for that, kind of the news cycle timeline, how long it takes to even hear back from a journalist on average based on thousands of pitches. So we will get back to you on follow-up tips specifically. That is it. It looks like I'll make sure to let you all go plenty in advance. Thank you everyone for being here today. I hope this was helpful and you learned a bit more about the noise online today and what to do about it. Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming with all your extremely valuable points and examples. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Always great to be here.
And if anyone has
anytime.
Yeah, awesome. I'm sure we'll have more in store. If there's any additional questions, feel free to email me directly at samantha@propelmypr.com. And yeah, thanks again. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.